Am I the asshole for taking time apart from my relationship and expecting him to wait? I, 24 female, recently experienced a life-altering series of events that has me questioning whether I was wrong for how I handled my relationship with my ex-boyfriend, Josh, 25 male. To explain everything properly, I need to go back to the beginning. Josh and I had been together for 3 years. We met in college, fell in love, and built a life together. He was my first serious boyfriend, my best friend, and for a long time, my everything. We did everything together. We moved into our first apartment, navigated our early careers, and even talked about marriage. But despite how perfect it seemed on the surface, something inside me felt incomplete. I had never been on my own. I went straight from living with my parents to living with Josh. I had no idea who I was outside of our relationship. I started wondering what it would feel like to stand on my own 2 feet, to figure out who I am without leaning on Josh for support. It wasn't about not loving him. I loved him deeply. But I was scared that if I didn't explore this now, I'd spend my life wondering, what if? One night, I sat Josh down and tried to explain. If we really want this to work long term, I said, I need to know who I am alone. Josh stared at me, his confusion quickly turning to anger.
What?
He said. This isn't a breakup, I insisted. I've never been on my own before. I need to figure out who I am alone. I don't want to spend my life wondering what if. Josh's response cut me to the core.
This is stupid. You're going to walk out of here, realize how much I do for you and how great I am, and you're going to start stalking me. This is just sad.
I was hurt, but I held firm. No, Josh. This is going to be great for both of us. And just like that, we packed up our shared life. I moved out of the apartment we'd called home and into a small studio downtown. It was terrifying but also exhilarating. I told myself it was the right choice, but deep down, I was terrified I'd made a mistake. Those first few weeks were brutal. I cried almost every night. I missed Josh's presence, the comfort of his voice, and even the mundane arguments about whose turn it was to do the dishes. I tried to throw myself into building a new life, but every milestone felt hollow without him to share it with. Even as I made new friends and started exploring my independence, the void Josh left behind was impossible to ignore. I got a new job at a marketing agency, where I met a group of colleagues who quickly became friends. For the first time, I was building a social life that didn't revolve around Josh. One of my coworkers, Emma, took me under her wing. She introduced me to a world I'd never explored. Happy hours that stretched into karaoke nights, impromptu weekend road trips, and a dating scene I'd never dared to touch before. At Emma's urging, I downloaded a dating app.
You don't have to marry them.
She said.
Just go out, have fun, and figure out what you like.
I was hesitant at first, but I gave it a try. My first few dates were awkward, but eventually I started to enjoy myself. I met a guy named Ben who was funny, confident, and completely different from Josh. Ben and I went out a few times, and one night, things got a little more than friendly. I won't go into too much detail, but it was liberating to experience intimacy without the weight of a 3-year history attached to it. Still, no matter how much I tried to move forward, I found myself thinking about Josh constantly. I missed his laugh, the way he would make my coffee just the way I liked it, and even the silly inside jokes we shared. The more I tried to push the memories aside, the more they surfaced. I realized that while I was learning to be independent, my heart still yearned for him. After about 6 months, I couldn't take it anymore. I missed Josh terribly, and while I'd grown a lot, I realized that my heart still belonged to him. I imagined us reuniting, stronger than ever, with me as a more independent and self-assured partner. I called him and asked if we could meet for coffee. We agreed to meet at a small cafe we used to frequent together. Walking in, I felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. Josh was already there, sitting at a corner table. He looked up when I entered, and for a brief moment, it felt like no time had passed. We exchanged pleasantries, but the tension in the air was palpable. As I sat down, I noticed that Josh seemed different. His shoulders were more relaxed, his smile more guarded. It was clear that he had changed in the months we'd been apart, and I suddenly felt like I was talking to a stranger rather than the man I once knew so intimately. I dove straight in. I'm done. I'm finally done, I said, tears streaming down my face. With our time apart, it's been difficult on both of us. I'm finally ready for us to be together. Josh looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed.
Alice, I'm seeing someone.
He said softly. The words hit me like a freight train. I blinked, trying to process what he'd just said. So, Josh, you want to just tell me when you're done then? I asked, my voice trembling. He shook his head.
I don't know, Alice.
I pushed harder. Like, we'll just wait till you're done, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. Josh's face hardened.
This is different. I'm not sure I want the same things anymore.
The room seemed to spin. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. You mean like me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Josh's voice was steady, but his words cut deep.
I didn't need an experiment to know I love you. And I'm not an idiot. You're, I guess, done with what you've been doing with whoever you've been doing, and you think you can run back to me? No thanks, I'll pass.
He pushed his chair back and stood up.
Take care, Alice.
He said, and walked out of the cafe, leaving me sitting there, stunned and heartbroken. It's been a month since that conversation, and I'm still reeling. Part of me feels like I did the right thing by taking time to find myself, but another part of me wonders if I was selfish to expect Josh to wait for me. I truly thought that our love would be strong enough to survive this, but now I'm not so sure. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on our relationship and what it meant to me. I've realized that while I may have grown as an individual, I failed to communicate my expectations clearly to Josh. I expected him to understand my journey without fully considering how it would affect him. In hindsight, I see that asking someone to put their life on hold was unfair, even if I believed it was for the greater good of our relationship. My friends are divided. Emma thinks Josh was being unfair and that he should have understood why I needed the time apart. But another friend, Sarah, says I was naive to expect him to put his life on hold while I explored. I'm trying to move forward, but it's hard to let go of the idea of what Josh and I could have been. So, am I the asshole for taking time apart from my relationship and expecting him to wait for me?